encourage everybody to start looking at the opportunities that exist where you can partner. Like, this is the most widely overlooked strategy out there. Regardless of where you are, if you're just starting out, if you're starting to grow, if you're maybe reached a certain place, you still can utilize this as an additional revenue stream. Or if you're just starting out, it is a bridge to cross over to full-time business. So there's a book out there by Robert Kiyosaki that says before you quit your day job, like the things you need to have in place before you take that leap of faith from, doing the side hustle, doing the part-time job to doing it full-time. And I'm telling everybody, and I cannot communicate this enough, you have to learn how to develop the relationships so you can leverage the skills that you do have and say, hey, how can I work with you on a project, or how can I work with you on a contract? It's so important that you start looking at that. What I also noticed, in addition to partnerships, sometimes, and I will say this in a caveat, sometimes it's important to look at doing a joint venture. Now, let me make sure I distinguish the difference. There is a huge difference between a partnership and a joint venture, between a partnership and a joint ventures. Joint ventures, when you use that term, it is a legal entity. It has its own EIN number. Normally, you will see multiple companies, 2 or more. They will include part of their name into the new legal entity name. All right, so there's some recognition that they are part of the joint venture. So for myself, I've done 2 legal joint ventures in the past. One with JCB Construction and one with Albu and Associates. So our joint venture name was ACY, and it had a plus, JCB or dash, I can't remember now. ACY JCB, a joint venture. ACY Albu, a joint venture. Like, understand this, it is a separate entity. It has its own tax filings. It has its own financials. So when you're looking at utilizing either one of those, you would say, well, Michael, why would I entertain doing a joint venture? Number one, it should be something that is strategic. It should be something that is strategic. What do you mean by strategic? So most people will do a joint venture when they're pursuing something, a project, a contract, where they do not have all of the qualifications themselves. They do not meet all of the qualifications themselves. And so they say, hey, is there someone else that maybe I can partner with, and together we can meet all of the qualifications to pursue a specific project? In addition, sometimes you may have strengths and they have certain strengths, and those strengths are different. So for an example, you may have the ability to obtain the work, or maybe you have the relationships but they don't. So in the case, you can watch our podcast that I did with Jason Albu, where we talked about our relationship and our pursuit more deftly. But in that particular joint venture, ACY Contractors was doing quite a bit of work with Orange County on, but he wasn't being shortlisted, meaning he wasn't being selected to go to the next phase in the procurement process. And so he would submit a proposal, but he never made it to the interview process. And so he kept saying, Michael, you're doing something right. And so we talked, and because we're friends and sit on the same in the same organization, of course we talk about things, and that's the importance of having relationships within the industry you're in. You have to have relationships. Everyone is not your competitor. I'm going to say that again. Everyone's not your competitor. And I promise you this, if you stay around and hang around in your industry long enough, you'll find out that your competitor could be your best partner. I felt to preach then. Y'all know I can get preachy. Your competitor can be your best partner. And so never think of people in that way. See them just as any other relationship. If something happens, great. If something doesn't, no worries. But we're going to be able to have a friendly fire. If we are competing, it's all good. That's normal. That's the process of business. But I want you to always keep that in your back pocket, that my competitor may be a potential partner. So that's what we came to note. Jason and I, though we were both pursuing OCPS work, he was larger than me. However, I had done an extensive amount of Orange County Public School work, and so it was an opportunity for him to get some more experience with OCPS, and it was an opportunity for us to continue to add larger projects to our resume. So we created a separate entity, which is known as a joint venture partnership. Okay. Now, what's important to note is that you should really start identifying what are our strengths, what are their weaknesses, what are my strengths, and what are my weaknesses. Okay. Because you want to try to leverage the relationship and figure out who is all bringing something to the table. So you need to understand what your contribution is. Again, there's nothing worse than a one-sided relationship. So if you're not bringing anything to the table, let me say this. If you're not bringing in anything to the table, why are you asking for 50%? Why are you asking for 80%? Why are you asking for 75% when you're not bringing in anything to the table? Which brings me to this next point. Some people don't understand when you form a joint venture or partnership, that is probably the biggest argument is how we're going to divide up the percentages. It's no different than when we started ACY. Originally it was 3 of us and we had to decide, okay, who's going to own what percentage? And for a long period of time, we all had the mindset, okay, because we're all coming together, let's all just own a third, and a third, right? But in business, and this is very important for you all to know, are y'all still with me? If you're still with me, drop a 1 in the chat. What's very important to note with this is that money dictates almost everything. Money dictates almost everything. So sweat equity is valuable. Relationships is valuable. But nothing is more valuable and sustainable than having capital within the company in order to do business. So you have to start looking at, okay, is your sweat equity the same value of having capital to run the organization? Are your relationships with potential clients the same value as the capital it takes to run the organization? Because without capital, we can't do anything. Without being able to start, it's hard to have staff. It's hard to hire people. It's really hard to move. So it's most commonly recognized, and this is really, really important in our culture, in our community, it's more commonly recognized to identify capital has a higher priority. Capital has a higher priority than your sweat equity. I'm going to say that again in case somebody missed it. Capital has a higher priority than sweat equity. Capital has a higher priority than the relationships you have. So what does that mean? What does that mean, Michael? What does that mean? That means if, let's say, Glenn's on the call, Glenn and I and Ryan, we decided we're going to start a joint venture, right? Glenn says, hey, Michael, I had a relationship with, a large, Fortune 500 company. And Ryan says, yes, but I'm going to bring $100,000 to the table to start this business. And I'm in the position, I'm saying, well, I'm going to do all the work. I don't have any money, but I'm going to do all the work. Some people will say, well, Michael, since you're going to do all the work and Ryan's just putting in money, you should have a bigger share. Some people will say, well, Glenn has a relationship to get us more work. Maybe he should have a bigger share. Right? So we have all of these conversations, these different mindsets about equity and who should have the largest equity. However, in business, it's most commonly determined those that put in the most capital will have the largest percentage of equity. I'm going to say that again. Those that put in the most capital will have the largest percentage of equity. Now, there is negotiation of that. So let's say I'm really going to do a lot of the work, like a lot. Maybe I'm going to do everything. Maybe I'm going to be the one to do, what's up, Samantha? Maybe I'm going to be the one to do everything within the business, right? And so Ryan may say, yeah, Michael, I'm just fronting the money. I'm not going to have really any input, any day-to-day decisions you're going to handle. Well, maybe that means something, right? So maybe we're not going to do a third, and a third, but maybe I give up some of my percentage to Ryan, but not all of it. Maybe I give up another 10% to him. So maybe he owns 43%, I own 23%, and the rest would be Glenn's. So that's another way to think about it. However, it's all a negotiation. But what's fair at the end of the day is the person that's putting in the capital, they should have the majority of the ownership. So I'll give you an example. Let's say all of us put in capital, right? All of us put in capital, but all of us are not working the business. So let's say Ryan put in 100,000, but he's pretty much just a silent partner, but he put in 100. Let's say I put in 50, but I'm still doing all the work. And let's say Glenn put in 50 and he's doing some work. Well, it's probably not necessarily a 50, 20, 25 split. It could be a 50, 35, 15 split. Like, you kind of have to say what seems fair. Or maybe Ryan says, you know what, Michael, you're doing so much of the work. I really value that, and I'm going to allow you to have a slightly larger share. And I think there's some conversations. So depending on the objective behind most people and what's important to them, there will be some back and forth, some pulling back and forth with that when we start talking about ownership, shares, and percentages. However, again, I cannot stress this enough. The priority will always be on the capital contributions that are made. The capital contributions that are made. So you should start there. So if you ever partner with anybody, you got to start thinking about where are the capital contributions coming from, who's putting in the most. Let's start off with a respective share, respective ownership percentages based on the capital contributions, and then we'll go from there and negotiate. Everybody get that? That makes sense? If you understand that, drop a yes in the chat. I want to make sure you're on board with that, because that's really, really important when it comes to any type of partnership and joint venture. But let me drop a yes in the chat. You got it. I want to make sure you got it. I want to maybe now move over to partnerships specifically for a contract, because I was explaining to one person just earlier today, which really prompted me to go ahead and do this live for those that may catch it and those that can go back and watch it on YouTube or whatever. There is a difference now between a joint venture, which is a separately formed legal entity, and a partnership. So there's a couple ways to look at it, and I want you to think about it like this. You can do a partnership to pursue a contract, right? So let's just say again, Ryan and myself, we decide, hey, we're going to partner to go after a project. Ryan has his own company, I have mine. However, who holds the contract? It's not a joint venture, so we can't say we hold the contract together. We can only say we hold the contract together if it's a legal joint venture with its own EIN number. All right? If it's just a partnership, that means who holds the contract, right? So now we have to decide who's in best position to be awarded this contract. That makes sense? Yes, yes. If you understand that, drop a 1 in the chat. Who's in the best position to be awarded this contract? That's the person that should be the lead. That's the person that should make the submission on the proposal. Whoever is in the best position to be awarded the contract. So who has the relationship? Who has the experience, right? Who has the leverage, right, to get the yes? Who has the leverage to seal the deal? That should be the person that takes the lead on the contract, okay? Now, once you have that person that's taking the lead on the contract's in their name, all right? But if the contract's in their name and you partner with them, if you have no internal agreement between yourselves, what can happen? What can happen? Come on, y'all, talk to me. What can happen if you don't have an internal agreement between yourselves? What can happen? Any thoughts? You come off mute in the chat. What can happen?
It can get messy.
It can get messy. The person that's holding the contract could say, hey, yeah, I know we talked about doing these things, but I'm not actually going to do it now. I'm going in a different direction. Oh, I found somebody else that can do it cheaper. Oh, yeah, I appreciate all your efforts, but yeah, I think I'm gonna do something. They just wake up one day and they just change their mind. And guess what? If you don't have an agreement in place prior to them receiving their contract, now you have no recourse. You have no ability to go back and say, oh, well, we talked about this. It really doesn't matter. You didn't really have a written agreement. Now, who's going to take the time to spend money on attorneys and go to court just because of that? No. Because most people know that if I'm going to spend that type of money to try to chase this pursuit, I probably should already have an agreement ahead of time. Okay, so what does that mean? Anytime you do a partnering arrangement, regardless what it looks like, you should have an agreement that's signed prior to pursuit of any type of contract. But prior to them being awarded any type of contract, you want to try to get that executed. Now, some of the things that you want to consider that should be in that agreement is our percentage. Are we splitting the profits? Are we splitting the expenses? So if Ryan has the contract, right, and I'm partnering with him, first of all, we have to say, well, what's the percentage that we should have? I would be wrong to say, Ryan, I want 60%, and Ryan's holding the contract. Why? He has the risk. So why should I get 60? Now, there are very few cases where I may be considered the person that's going to back everything 100%. That means I'm putting up all the capital, I'm putting up all the staff, I'm doing all the work, and we call that somewhat of a pass-through. You may hear this terminology one day, a pass-through. That means Ryan is just paper. Ryan was, and you'll see, matter of fact, I've seen some coaches on Instagram and YouTube that talks about going after government contracts and just subbing it all out. And some of them go after contracts blindly. I don't recommend that strategy, but it's people that do it. It's people that do it. How they got $5 million contracts and they found somebody to sub it all out to. That's fine. That's fine. You can do that, but it's so risky. However, the point is, if they're going to sub 100% of all the risk, that means they only have a small risk, and that means they placing all the risk in a contract on that subcontractor, right? However, they cannot eradicate themselves from 100% of the risk, because at the end of the day, their name is on the contract. So if something goes wrong, whoever the client is, the owner, they're going to pursue them because their name is on the contract. So I think that has some validity, but in rare cases do you see the person who's holding the contract have a significant less percentage in the deal, right? It's very few occasions, but I've seen it happen, and it's specifically for what we call pass-throughs. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a person won a government contract. Let's just use you, Isabel, since we've been talking about, for transportation, right? I'm holding the contract. I sent in the proposal and I won it, but I'm not doing anything. I'm going to hire you to do literally 100% of everything. Schedule things. You're going to have the staff. You're going to pay your own people. You only get paid from me when I get paid. Now, I may pursue that and I say, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just put enough profit in there for myself. So maybe I'll mark your price up 5%, right? Or I'll reduce, my fee to a minimal amount where I still make a little money, but I'm putting all the blame, all the risk on you. And most times that's the way it works when it's a pass-through, because normally most of the profits that are based on the market rate or what's available in the market, it will dictate the margins. And normally there's not enough margins to pay both of us a good portion. So let me give you an example what I mean by that. And hopefully if this is not clear, just ask me a question. So let's say, for instance, in the transportation, the average markup to be competitive, let's say, is 20%. My profit margins are 20%. top of my costs. Let's just say that's what it is to be competitive, to pursue something and actually win it, right? Now, I was awarded the contract with 20%. And I tried to say, hey, Isabel, I'm going to hire you to do it. Isabel's going to say, well, I need that whole 20% because that's what I need to actually make a good profit. So what we could do, if I'm holding a contract, I may say, okay, well, since I'm not really doing any work, how about I just keep maybe 3 to 5% and you get, 15 to 17, right? Now you have work, you still maybe have a manageable fee, but we call that a pass-through. That happens a lot, especially in federal government contracting. And so you may see kind of percentages that are lopsided that way. I've seen smaller firms take on larger contracts and have a large firm support them and support the contract. I've seen reverse joint ventures that are the same way, meaning let's say someone like ACY Contractors, we hold a prime contract, but now we have an international firm like Skanska Turner that's going to do everything, where my going to be significantly smaller, but I'm going to offset the risk to them and not me. So I'll take a smaller percentage of. But it's things like this you need to start recognizing in the industry. These are industry standards. These are best practices across all industries when it comes to percentages, markups. You need to know what makes the most sense. All right, did that make sense? Anybody have any questions on that? Any questions? Any questions? Any scenarios that you can think of that would cause a question? Anybody throw me a scenario. Let's talk about it. Throw me a scenario. Let's talk about it.
Mr. Michael,
Mm-hmm.
with that last scenario that you just mentioned where a bigger firm might come in, when at the negotiation table, whose name comes up front, if that makes sense?
The negotiation table with the client?
Yes.
Yeah.
Knowing that.
Yeah, so it depends. Like, normally it's who has the relationship, right? It also depends on the contracting method that was utilized. So let me give an example. There's a difference between government contracts and private contracts. A lot of private contracts, their procurement process is not as scrutinized as it is on the government side. On the government side, they have a routine RFP or RFQ process that they go through, request for proposal, request for qualifications, that they go through, where they will give an opportunity to actually respond to that request. And so that process may be a little bit different. So whoever submits the RFQ or the RFP, normally their name is on that proposal, right? So that's how it gets in front of that person. Now, on the private sector side, sometimes they may not have a formal RFQ or RFP process. It may be, hey, I have the power in my position to hire whoever I want to hire. Or I may solicit some proposals or some quotes, and maybe I look at, the best of three, or something like that. So every company has their own procurement policies. However, in most cases, people are looking at, okay, who do I have the relationship with? Who do I know? That's almost always where it starts, because people always do business with those they like, know, and trust. And so it's important to recognize that's usually where it starts. Again, when I gave this scenario with ACY and Albu, when Jason and we had pursued a project, it started at $9 million, it didn't end up being $6 million. So it was at Odyssey Middle School, right? I had the Orange County Public School experience. He was trying to get in, but I didn't have the capacity of going after that project by myself, but he did, right? So that's why we said, hey, let's do a joint venture and we can pursue this together. So that was our strategy. Now, there may be strategies where someone will submit and you're not the strongest person, I would say that you really should entertain who has the relationship. If neither one of you have the relationship, it doesn't really matter. If who has the most qualifications should be the leader, because you will be able to place the client at ease based on your amount of experience, right? And that's kind of where I would start. I would start like prioritize who has the relationship, then who has the experience or who has the qualifications. So I would kind of prioritize those two, and then everything else is kind of tertiary. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yes, sir. And I have one more follow-up.
Okay.
What if it's like, in this case, in my scenario, I have the qualifications, but he holds a relationship with the client?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, again, it really depends.
Okay.
So what's important to the client? Is the relationship important to the client, or is the whole package important to the client? Because let me just run through a couple scenarios. Here's another question. Is the client competitively advertising for this contract? Meaning, are they actively looking for other people that will qualify or meet certain criteria that they're looking to award? Because if that's the case, you want to have the strongest packages possible. So then I would lead and say, okay, the person that has in a partnership, not a joint venture, but in a partnership, I would have the person that has the relationship lead, right? Because that's what's really most important. That should be the first thing. Who has the relationship? Because the door is open because there's a relationship. When there's no relationship, the door is not open yet. And it's harder to open the door just with qualifications over relationship. Boy, I'm talking good. Mike, you talking good. Mike, you talking good.
That's really good. So, that's exactly what I let happen too. So just to let you know.
Yeah. So and that's fine. Now you have to figure out, okay, all the other things to see if it makes sense. So let's say the client actually is soliciting people that has the relationship, they have experience, and they're having to prove that they are the right person for the contract. Well, that means I need the entire package. I need to put everything together to demonstrate we have capacity, right? So no different than why I have this coat on today. I just came literally from a presentation for Orange County Public School with my partner, Williams Company. So I've been partnering with Williams Company for 17 years now. We've completed over 20-some schools in Orange County, like new construction builds, and I've been their diversity partner. So because of that, right, we have a partnership agreement. In that partnership agreement, we'll agree to what percentage of the fee that I will collect. We'll agree to what positions I will have on the project. However, when we submit the proposal, it's under their name because we're not a joint venture, we're a partnership. So it's under their name. However, you will see my logo, you will see my information all throughout the entire package. Why? I also was part of the presentation today. So even though we got to the second phase and we had an interview, right? I was a part of the team that also interviewed for the project, the contract. So I want you to understand, like, you have to define what it looks like, but everybody should be bringing something to the table. Because if you're not bringing anything to the table, then you really should look at what percentage you actually are, what is really equitable, and it shouldn't be a lot, okay? If you're not bringing anything to the table, it shouldn't be a lot, okay? So a rule of thumb, if you're not bringing anything to the table, 10% and less is what your fee recognition should be. Meaning, what percentage of the overall profits should you have access to? It should be less than 10%. All right. Now, some people. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. That brings me to my other question. I am in that second phase, asking for the whole operational intricacies, and like you mentioned, hey, we now want the full package of what this look like.
Right.
You mentioned something important, that in your case, in your proposal, you ended up putting your logo.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So how I guess my question is, in my case, where I would definitely want that at the end of all of this to
Hmm.
go on my capability statement, because it'll make it look really really meaty and heavy. What I guess my thing is, and I know I guess it's just a matter of maybe talking with the other partner, but like our logo being released, especially if in this case I'm doing a lot of that equity of the administrator submitting the proposal part. Um,
Right. So in your situation, you will actually make sure that as you submit your proposal, identifying each person in their capacity. So for instance, in I don't have the slide to put up for you all, but in our situation, let's say we're pursuing this new elementary school that's going to be built near Horizons West area in Orlando. Let's say I'm gonna have my superintendent on the project, right? So we have an org chart that shows, hey, what is Michael gonna do? I'm gonna work with trying to find other diverse firms to participate on the project. I'm also going to provide services on the pre-construction. So when they start pricing this and we're trying to get subcontractors to price, I'm going to work on the team that's going to help with that. And then when we start construction, my superintendent is going to be on the job, but they also have staff that will be on the job. Okay. So we talk about in our not operating agreement, our partnering agreement, what those positions will be. And we put all of that information and we convey that same information to the client. They know, okay, yeah, ACY is legitimately going to be on this project, right? It's truly a partnership, even though Williams Companies is going to carry the prime contract. So in your situation, it could be the same. Now, sometimes to some clients, it could be a little weird if they're not accustomed to seeing that. You can just really explain it. It could be in the cover letter. Hey, company A is pursuing this contract with the client. However, company B is going to be our partner and assist in these areas. And then you show that on the org chart exactly what services you all want to provide. Um, sometimes it's important. Let's say company A don't want it to seem like they're just everything to company B, then it's all about how you are pitching the idea and how you're communicating it. So you may have to show that company A will have some of its own staff, company B will have other staff that's able to provide those services. Sometimes that's a stronger pitch. Some clients are, oh, I'm getting 2 for 1. They're thinking, hey, I can't fail because now I have 2 companies that's going to be working on this. It's not just one. So I think it really depends on how you sell the story and the relationship. But it's just important to convey that the contract will be held by Company A, right? And that Company A will have the insurance, will have the licenses and all that kind of stuff. Because that's all the client cares about is that Company A has that information. They really don't care about Company B. Did that answer your question?
yes, sir, it did. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Any questions on that? Any questions on that? Any questions on that? So listen, if you have a business and if you're not looking at doing partnerships right now, I want to implore you, start looking at how you can develop partnerships with other companies so you can continue to grow business, whether you're working another full-time job or not. It doesn't really matter. It's an opportunity for you to position yourself, whether you're trying to come off of your full-time job or whether you're just trying to enhance your revenues. Either way, it works. It works. It works. Okay. Did I explain the difference between joint ventures and partnerships well enough? Everybody understand that? If you got it, drop a 1 in the chat. If you got it, drop a 1 in the chat.
Mr. Michael, I had one more question
Okay.
in regards to that. And I have written it down. The question was, what partnering agreement should you stay away from in this case? Like knowing, like, hey, okay, this is a good company where, especially if it's like the first time that you've ever done it, where it's in this case, I'm like, oh wait, I didn't realize how much work.
Yeah.
It was imbalanced.
No, I got it. I got it. So this is tricky. It's like dating someone. You don't know them until you know them, right? So it's no different than people when they have what they call what they have those agreements before they get married. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They have a I can't think of it. Prenup, right? The most people don't think they need a prenup because they don't want a person to feel bad and all that kind of stuff, and they want it to be fair. They don't want to enter the relationship, with the person feeling a certain kind of way, and then all of a sudden they realize they needed it. So it's kind of similar to that. The partnering agreement should identify any and everything that possibly could come up as a situation or as an argument. So everything is identified up front, what's going to happen. We should identify who's going to do what work, what positions are going to be filled, what rates are going to be paid, the frequency of payment. All of those things should be identified in your agreements. Now, I know those that are our VIP and our elite mentorship program, they get these documents as part of their mentorship. To all of those that are not a part of the mentorship at those levels, you can purchase those for $97 and we can send those over to you. Okay, so you'll actually have an agreement. Now that just really will save you thousands of dollars because these have been vetted by attorneys already. Okay, so $97 gets you that instantly. All right, but VIP in our elite program, they get this, and we actually put it their letterhead and all that kind of stuff on it, so we have that document ready to go. All right, but it's important that you identify any and everything. The more you can identify, the better. Normally, here's another point. These agreements normally only that contract. I'm gonna say that again. You want to be specific to that contract with that agreement. So let's say, for instance, you're like, hey, we want to look at doing work together for a few years. You want to do a separate agreement for each contract. In that case, if something happens bad on one contract, it doesn't affect the other. All right, so you have an agreement for every contract that you have, or every contract that exists with each client. Really, really important. You don't want to do a catch-all. Now, if you're going to do a catch-all, then you may want to look at doing a joint venture company, and that's totally separate. Joint venture companies. Let me just talk about joint venture companies just a little bit, and then I'll take more Q&A. So joint venture companies, we talked about the example of ACY Albu, ACY JCB that I've had in the past. Now, mind you, we did 50-50 ownership on both, and so all the costs associated with the contract, okay, with the client. So let me just put in perspective. Odyssey Middle School, that was the contract. All the costs that were associated with the subcontractors ran through the joint venture. All of our payroll was costed from each individual company, ACY Albu. We sent the invoice to the joint venture. You got it? We sent the invoice to the joint venture. Why? Because all individual costs are funded by the joint venture. It's a separate entity. It held the contract, right? We're almost like contractors underneath that entity. So all the costs for that specific project only, that specific contract only, it ran through the joint venture. Any payments that had to be made was paid through that joint venture. Okay, that makes sense? All right, so now at the end of the day, let's just say we made $100,000. That was the profit that was left over from that contract. We now split those profits, and on my books, on Albu books, we had a revenue of $50,000. A revenue of $50,000. Now, if you look at that compared to all of your other projects, you're going to show a revenue of $50,000 without any expenses because it's coming from the company. All right, so now it looks like, man, you just made a whole bunch of free money. So that's another reason why joint ventures is another revenue stream because it will enhance your bottom line. What do you mean, Michael? Increase your percentage margins of profit. So if you're normally making 10%, it could increase it, 11, 12%. So now your books even look better when you're making money in your joint ventures because it's straight profit to your bottom line. Okay, so that's another advantage I'll talk about with doing joint ventures. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits. What are some of the cons? What are some of the negative things? I think this is where we was going, Isabel. You don't know until you know. It's like meeting somebody for the first time. It's like being married, right? You don't know what you know. You don't know what you don't know until maybe 5 years later you realize, oh, I saw signs of this, but I didn't realize it was gonna be this bad. Right? Y'all, everybody with me? So that's any relationship. That's why it's important to have everything written out. Yes, darling, or this good. But I was speaking about the negative specifically, like if, let's say for an example, and I had this happen, I didn't realize that I was going to have to literally do all the work, and at the time, there was a situation where we were really doing way more work than we were supposed to, because the other staff from the other company was supposed to kind of do some certain work, and they weren't. So really, that's a breach of contract. We need to have a visit. We need to revisit this issue because you're not doing what you agreed to, right? So some things like that come up, and you have to say, "Hey, this is what the agreement says. We need to rediscuss this. We need to have a conversation about this." Make sense? Okay. Also, with the joint venture company, you want to identify who handles the financials. So in a JV, regardless of the percentage of ownership, it doesn't matter. You have to determine in your joint venture agreement who's going to manage the financials for that joint venture, because it's a separate entity. That means it has a separate set of books. So who's going to manage that? And then you want to make sure, if you're not managing that, you have access to it, right? So you know what's going on. So if it's QuickBooks, you want to have QuickBook access so you can see what's happening. So you can go in yourself, or your CPA has access to it, right? So that's different than in a partnership. In a partnership, whoever holds the contract is going to manage the books because they held the contract. All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I did not cover. I'll talk about one last thing, and then I'll take Q&A. Bonding. Let's talk about bonding. Here's another misconception. Some people believe that because we're 50-50, let's say we're 50-50 partners in a true joint venture. That means we have a separate EIN, separate entity. Some people believe that if I bring, say, the contract is $10 million, and at 50%, I should bring $5 million of bonding. The other company bring $5 million of bonding. That's 10. It really doesn't work that way in bonding. In bonding, I don't know what kind of calculation they run, but they want to ensure that it's a little more than that. So they may look for a total of 12 million. What I was told is that because, let's say, one company defaults, they're still at risk, and that sometimes they don't like that. They like to have additional room and capacity based on bonding capacity. So sometimes the other one company may have to bring 7 and not just 5, or both companies may have to bring 6. And so sometimes we can be a little misled with those numbers, thinking, hey, the contract's 10 million, all I need to do is bring my 50%. Sometimes you may have to bring a little bit more based on whatever surety you're using. So that's kind of been my experience with that. Sometimes they want a little bit more, so I don't want you to be taken by surprise if that ever happens. All right, Miss Samantha, you got to see I know more than just the Bible today. All right. Anybody else? Questions? Melissa, what's up? You have any questions?
No, not today.
All right, let's catch up. I need to catch up with you. Let's catch up. Check in, see what's going on. Glenn, you have any questions?
No, sir.
All right. Isabel.
Yes, sir. I have one more.
Okay, no worries. That's what we here
I came
for.
ready with some. Yes, sir. So my other question was, just piggyback off what you said in terms of payment.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood on the joint venture side, when it comes down to partnering, as you mentioned, the company that takes the lead, everything will go through them. How would you keep that person accountable, especially if it's the first time with a contract of that magnitude?
So it depends on your agreement, first of all, right? I think there's a number of ways. If you don't trust them with money, then you really want to strongly consider if you want to partner with them. It may be more appropriate for you to do a contract agreement, which means they're hiring you and they're subject to whatever terms you all negotiate to. Okay? So I want you to think about it that way. So a partnering agreement is a little different than a subcontract agreement. Partnering means you guys are kind of like this, right? Regardless of the percentage of ownerships, you kind of like, hey, we're a team. We have different, it's like my finger, my pinky, my ring finger, index, all of that, right? My thumb, they're all different sizes, but they all play a key role. But we're a team. That's partnering. Subcontract, you're kind of like this. I hold the contract and I'm hiring this person to do the work. So you're sub-tier. So now the relationship is different. And I think you have to keep that in mind, because now you can say, hey, at some point in time, because we're not a team, if I'm a subcontract and I'm not getting paid, maybe I put in my contract I have the right to refuse services. As a partner, now I'm looked at a lot differently because I'm partnering with this team, and if I refuse to do services, now I'm looked at just like the company holding the contract. So you want to maybe think about what are the consequences if something does go wrong, whether or not I want to be a partner or a subcontractor. Now that determines everything on the pay side. Okay. Unfortunately, you are only limited to what you're able to negotiate. So if they're holding the contract, you can ask and say, hey, is there a way we can maybe track this job separately? Or you got to realize, if, let's say for instance, they don't want to track the job separately and they have to still run that contract through their books. They don't want to give you access to their books, right? So how do you now keep up with the job? Maybe you say, hey, send us weekly financial reports or updates on this contract. So maybe every week you're getting a report, but if it's accurate, but you can kind of get an idea. If you've been doing it long enough, you can get an idea if it's right based on costs that are being incurred, etc. So that's why you really want to think about it. No different in any business. That's why you can't partner with everybody. Right? Partnerships break up all the time. So for these reasons, you have as much as possible in your agreement so you can have an action plan to address any issues that you have. So you can have an action plan to address any issues that you have. That makes sense?
Yes, sir. That's really good. I'll take notes because that makes
Yeah.
a whole. Yeah.
Yes.
And so you're saying in this case outweigh whether or not it should be a partnering and subcontracting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll definitely get to work and figure that part out.
Yeah. Again, If you all just want to buy my stuff, y'all can buy my stuff. I don't mind selling it. All right, you can just buy and save yourself the headache. Because the thing is, you're gonna ask Chat GPT to put something together for you, and that's great. But has it been reviewed and confirmed that it's an actual legal document that will hold up in the court of law in the state of Florida? So that's another piece. So you can try to put that in the chat prompt and see what happens. But anyway, so you want to use documents that are tried and true as well. What's up, Nehemiah? You hopped on, man. You hopped.
Yeah, hey, I'm driving right now, so yeah. Hey, how's it going?
All right. You hopped on right at the last minute. I'm gonna have to send you the link to YouTube so you can watch the replay. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it.
No worries. All right. Good to see you, man. So yeah, Isabel, that's really, really important. There's no 100% way to keep somebody accountable if they're gonna do it right. There is just not. Now, if you're a joint venture, now you have access to the books, so you can have your CPA, your bookkeeper actually keep, look for things, right? But if they hold the contract and you're just a partner, you're very limited. So now you're trying to trust them. So I would just get those weekly reports.
Yes, sir. And then can you explain the services? Because I was taking notes. The agreements that you offer for sale.
Oh, I was just talking about. Well, I have all three. If you want a subcontract or a. Let me see if I can mute.
She was at my church.
They having a good time over there, ain't they? All right. All right, I got it. So services. So I have all those contracts, agreements. Subcontract agreement, joint venture agreement, association agreement, which is a partnership document. We call it an association agreement. So yeah, just 97 books. You can get those. You can send it over to you.
Yes, sir. I'll do that right away.
Oh boy,
Thank
that's
you
funny.
to you and Dr. Felicia. Yeah, because that'll be amazing. That would save me a lot of a good outline.
Yeah, it's a good outline, and then you'll know. Okay, every paragraph within the agreement, you can say, okay, let's talk about this item. Let's have a discussion around this item, and then it maybe give you some things to think about. And in addition, there may be some things you want to add, right, to the scope of services that you will be providing, and just be more detailed, whatever that scope of services are. And you can be specific as possible. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Nehemiah, I know you're driving. You had any questions on doing joint ventures, partnerships? I know I was stressing about the importance of doing them. I'm not sure if you had started looking at that or not.
I definitely want to, look at the actual, the recap of this presentation. But we're actually, we're looking at possibly doing a merger of companies with one of our biggest subcontractors that we were basically funneling into for a long time, that I mentioned in class last year. But I just wanted to, definitely look at those documents or those templates or boilerplate templates, because I think that they'll definitely be, a game changer for us. Because again, we are looking at seriously doing that this year, before the first quarter is out.
Okay, so are you all doing the acquisition, or are you all trying to partner with them?
We're actually looking at partnering with them.
Okay, and do you think you need a separate legal entity to do this?
Yes, yeah, for sure, without a doubt.
Okay, so, and then with I know you said funding of money. Are you saying that a lot of the capital you've had, your company's had to kind of invest capital up front for them? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no. What I was saying, well, what I meant by that was saying that we were subcontracting all of our work through them.
Okay.
So with respect to
okay,
yeah, that's all. Yeah.
I got it. So it's more like what I was talking about earlier. You weren't on the call. It could be. Would you consider it a pass through?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's what we were doing. Yeah.
Okay.
We were, like our company right now at that point, we were passed through it. For it.
Okay. And so what is this company bringing to the table where they feel like they need you?
Okay, so they have the personnel.
Okay.
It's just they don't have the visibility and the reachability to individuals such as real estate investors and so forth. Like basically they don't have the work.
I got it. So I don't know, for those that are on the call still, I know we lost a couple earlier, but this is the exact thing I was talking about earlier, right? You see, you have situations where people are bringing different things to the table, and now we have to decide what makes the most sense. Are we partnering? Are we doing a true joint venture? Or am I just going to continue to subcontract? So why are you looking at potentially partnering with them in this capacity versus just having them as a subcontractor?
Just because both of our visions align with one another on the same wavelength as far as like the overall scope of the business, and what we can touch, because we understand as separate entities, we can only get to so much work, or we can only get to a certain level. So once, if indeed this does go through, or when this does go through, how will that, increase how would it, it'll increase the visibility of us. Like we'll be able to walk into rooms and say, hey, okay, we have X amount of staff available to do this, and we're on that playing field. We can get in that playing field, basically, if that makes sense.
I understand. I think that I'm going to just caution you with this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a caveat for you to think about. If anyone come to me and say, Michael, can you do a $200 million job? I'm going to say yes.
Right.
Why? Because I know who to go talk to. Right? It's not that ACY can do a $200 million job, but I know who to go talk to who can. I have too many relationships. So my thing is that you got to really understand why you really need to potentially do a joint venture. I think you want to really think through that. Like, do you really need it? Because sometimes it's the way you sell the story. It's the way you the pitch. And it's not necessarily you have to have a single joint venture entity to do what you're trying to do. Because you if you have access to the resources, you got the resources. So and vice versa. Like if I think it can go either direction. I think just really need to identify, do we really need a joint venture? A joint venture because you're going to spend additional funds to put the entity together. You have another set of books somebody got to manage. You have another set of financials somebody, a CPA has to complete. So you have additional costs, right? So you really need to figure out, does this really make sense to do if we don't have to? Okay? If we don't have to. All right? And sometimes that comes with trust with the relationship of things of that nature. But if we don't have to, you may just need to be tweaking how you're selling your partnership. Because maybe that's what it is. It's a partnership, and you all maybe identify, maybe the right approach is, let's pursue a certain market, and we'll write in our agreement for any pursuits we do together in, let's say, single family renovations, right? We'll identify what scopes we'll each do, but specifically for this market, this is what we'll focus on in this partnership. This is how we'll break up the profits. This is how we'll handle the cost, right? You can maybe just do it that way, versus having to have to me, you only do a legal entity when you really have to. Like, you have to. In order to get the job, in order to qualify, you had to do a legal entity. You follow what I'm saying? Like, for me, when we did ours, there was a couple things. Because, ACY could not carry the contract in our name solo, but we could when we did the JV, because now we're bringing capacity together. So we had to do a JV in order to increase our overall capacity. You follow what I'm saying? It wasn't necessarily just a sales pitch that I have qualifications, that I have the resources. No, I do. As long as I have partners, I do have that. So you got to look at, is there something that's truly forcing us to have to create a new legal entity, or can we just function as a partnership?
Got it. And thanks for that clarity, and thanks for bringing that up, because the more that, as you're talking it out and I'm listening and I'm thinking at the same time, I'm like, wow, that a partnership would be, I believe, more beneficial, without actually going in and talking it out or whatever.
Right.
Because, that's really what it is,
right.
Essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then just figure out who's going to do what, and then you have that identified, and then maybe if you all want to have fee sharing, meaning profit sharing amongst the two organizations, then you can identify that in also your agreement as well. But you definitely have to be specific on what markets or what contracts that pertains to, because you don't want it to be across the board. If it's across the board and everything, it's going to get so convoluted and it's going to be a mess.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I'm tracking.
Awesome.
Got it.
All right, y'all. I'll take one more question if there's one more, and then I'm headed out the door. Any other questions? Nope. All right, well, in like manner, as I always do, let me pray over you as we end out this session today. We will have this on our YouTube page under our podcast section. So if you want to go back, check out the replay of this to catch anything, we'll have this for you. All right. And if you all are looking for those documents, again, it's $97, and we'll send those documents over to you. Just send us an email and we'll get it to you. Just send email to support@michaeldyoung.com, support@michaeldyoung.com, and we'll get those documents and a link over to you for that. All right. But let us pray. Father, we just say thank you for this time. We ask, God, that you will just bless each one of these business owners and all of their endeavors. We say thank you, God, for creating new opportunities for them, and we just trust that you will lead them and guide them. I pray, God, that they won't make irrational decisions. They won't make unwise decisions, but continue to put the right people around them to help guide them and direct them, so they make strategic decisions that will be successful and sustainable. We just say thank you, and I ask your blessing upon their lives and their homes and their families. And we say thank you for all these. In your son Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, family. God bless you all.